park a minute ago today. So, Brother Hans Smith, what do you stand and ask the Lord to bless this day and say hello? This is my brother from the Church of God, Anderson, Indiana. They got a whole roof over here, so you can say hello to this group. I've got to play sometime today, whenever the money is right. The money gets right.
I'm a worship leader. I love worshiping. If you can just stand to your feet real quick before we pray. And let's sing this song. How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. All sing, how great, how great is our God. Thank you for this great opportunity to learn more about your direction, your way. Yes, not only your word, not only your works, but your ways. Yes. Thank you that we're learning your ways to submit and to sacrifice and to do what you would have us to do. Yes. Use them in a powerful way today. That we not just be hearers of this word, oh God, but we'll do something. Yes. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
I told somebody the other day, I think I can statistically prove anything. I can give you statistics that will prove to you that we are in the worst situation in post-Christendom, and now they're saying, even in Europe, they're calling Europe pre-Christian again. Wow. They've made the cycle, and they call it pre-Christian. I can take some stats, though, and show you that it's pretty sad. You know those stats. You read them. You see them. And we need to batten down the hatches and just wait for the end. I can turn around and show you other stats that we're doing phenomenal. Our own tribe, we have to be very transparent and vulnerable. And so I was at a meeting the other day, and I showed the stat with the Assemblies of God that we have last year averaged, our church average of 13,000 plus churches is the highest in the history of our nation. 155 we're averaging Sunday morning attendance. Then I put a stat up that for the last 30 years, our median-sized church has been 70. And this last year, it dropped to 67. So you are faced with this conundrum if you're a leader in your organization or in your church or wherever you are. Do you build a burning platform, or do you start a pep rally? If you build a burning platform, you make it sound too bad. People will want to quit. If you start a pep rally and you get too exuberant, they think you're too naive and you don't know what's going on. I don't know the answer to those dilemmas. I just know we keep doing what we're doing and trust God for the best. You heard us yesterday. It's His church. Now, one thing I do know is that the stats are saying, and I don't know your tribe if you're from another tribe than ours, but anything you read from Pew and all the research is that the plateaued and declining churches are increasing. And I love the statement that you can birth babies easier than you can resurrect the dead. I don't have a problem with that statement. But I also know Jesus did pretty well at funerals. So think about the plateaued and declining churches that are in your tribe or under your influence. In our situation, about 1,250,000 people every Sunday worship in plateaued and declining churches. Well, here's what I know. They're already faithful people. Second thing I know is they have relationships in the community. The third thing I surmise, but don't know, that most of them are in churches that either they own the property or they don't owe that much on the property. So what if we saw plateaued and declining churches turn around and become missional and outward focused and not involved with so much protecting their own preferences, but fulfilling the Great Commission and the Great Commandment? What would happen if we turned all of the people attention away from themselves? And Ken Hunter, the church doctor, in 15,000 people that he interviewed, he found that 80% claimed that they thought church, the primary purpose of church, was for their own personal comfort and care. Now, I don't think they would actually get up and say, it's all about me. But you let us change one of their preferences. From moving the piano to taking the piano out and replacing it with a keyboard. I have my own preferences. I went back some time ago, I've gone several times since, but I went back some time ago to the church I formerly pastored at their invitation. And when I got there, because I'm a musician, in 1986, one of the first things I did was buy a brand new 9-foot black ebony grand. And I went back and they had given that grand piano away. So my first few seconds in the pulpit was venting. Because see, I have personal preferences too. And I like change until it happens to me. They built a new airport out there that some of you flew into. It's a beautiful new airport. I don't like it. Or I didn't. And I went over to the chapel at the big building close to us and got all the road warriors together, and we got in chapel and started chanting, and see what happened is they took our restaurant out. And the people who knew my name and knew what I liked to eat for breakfast, and I could get my coffee and my paper before I started on that journey that was going to get my victory and my sanctification. If you've ever flown lately, you know what I'm talking about. They replaced it with where they put stuff in a cellophane wrapper and you had to nuke it. It tasted like cardboard and it was terrible. So I started a campaign against them. Now I talk about change. I teach change. I'm a change agent until it happens to me. I actually went to a member of the airport board here in Springfield. No, I'm serious. Now, with full disclosure, that wasn't that big a deal, because it was Dr. Spence, but he was on the airport board. He was the president of Evangelical University for 40 years, and I said, we got a problem. We don't like the new restaurant, which is gone. It's just a counter. I said, we're upset. Everybody's upset. Y'all heard that before.
Yeah, that's right.
Everybody is unhappy with your decision. Now, he's tall and always wears a suit. I accused him of mowing his lawn in a suit. And he looked at me, and he's real sophisticated in his tone, and he said, Alvin, we did a lot of research and several focus groups. Best we can determine, you're the only one. So I get it. I get what some of you are facing. I get that. But what if we could see this thing flip? And what we're doing these few days had the catalytic, supernatural, with God's help, ability to change people from focusing on themselves to focus on those that are not yet here. And we could see a revival where 1 million or so, or however many it is, people that are kind of inward focused would become outward focused, would become evangelistic in their outreach, and start trying to have conversations. See, it's not about, we don't ask you to make goals about how many people you're going to baptize. You can't do that. You don't know. You're not the Savior. But you can quantify how many conversations you can have that bump people toward Jesus.
Amen.
And that's what we're trying to do. When we talk about goal setting, we're not asking people to do stuff that only God can do. But we are saying there are ways to become strategic about our involvement in our communities. And that's what this is all about. That's why you took time to be here. That's why you came and spent your time and effort, money, and energy to come here and be a part of something that could see kingdom advancement and eternal reward. So that's what it's all about. It's not, can I learn a new strategy? It's, can we change? Can we really change? Can we really change? And I think we can.
Amen.
Because Jesus broke up all the funerals he attended. And I'm saying, we can believe that the dead, these bones, shall live again.
Amen.
And that's why we do it. Amen. Okay. The ushers will come. We'll get the altar. So we're starting in Retreat 2 today. We led you through Retreat 1 yesterday. Retreat 1 is a long retreat. We get it. There was a time in our past when we had 5 retreats, not 4. And the first retreat was what we call Discovery Weekend. And it was a free retreat that people came and we did the assessment, the life cycle that Ron did yesterday, to see if people wanted to become a part of another 4 weeks where we would take them through mission, vision, values, congregational reality, community, context, minimal health factors, and building a strategic plan. But when we stopped charging the Discovery Weekend, we modified it some and rolled it into Retreat 1 so it would be a 4 retreat cycle, because it still is a huge time commitment. But we believe it's worth the investment. So yesterday morning we dealt with the life cycle, and then we started with mission and vision. Ron did that yesterday. Today, remember I said there's 2 words that we don't consider to be words that are off limit: repetitive and redundant. So when we come back, they have had an opportunity, the teams, to meet in their own setting. If you study your notes, there's a long prayer journal activity because we want to bathe everything in prayer. Then they have homework assignments. They were to finish their dream statements if they didn't finish them during the table talk. They were to finalize a vision statement and have it ready at Retreat 2. Then when they came back, we actually walked them through a review session. And we did it unapologetically. We do it unapologetically. And we go through the same transformation statement. We make them read it again. Why? Because we're wanting to get the information from their head into their heart. Into their heart. We use quotes. We go back over the mission, focusing on the belief system and the behavior system. I won't do it the way we would do it in a retreat, but we take as much time as the person leading, whether that's called a trainer or consultant or whatever they feel the room needs, that's what they do. So the part that we cannot coach or display to you is the piece and the part that the person leading the session has to have some kind of discernment, intuition, timing, because they are there and they're leading. So if they need to take more time here, or if there are questions about this, they have the flexibility. As I told you yesterday, the reason we want multiple voices speaking to you in this setting is to show you that it's not just rote. And we're going to show you some things today that people have created in their strategic plans. And the diversity of that, again, illustrates that it's not just cookie cutter, one size fits all. Please know that. Please know that. Now we have a book called Spirit Empowered Church. Mike Clarence will be here later today. He has a book on the 5 functions that's more devotional. They're out there. When we have retreats, normally every person that's coming, the pastor gets a book free, and the people have to purchase one. The reason is that during the homework sessions, there are assignments to read certain chapters that go along with the implementation process. And several people today, some people have come here today simply because they were introduced to that book. And when they read the book, they wanted to know, is there anything else? And that's how they connected to this session here today. So we go back over mission. This template is something that we want them to begin to become comfortable with. And you notice that we interchange these words. Those connect, grow, serve words, go, were words that when I first started in some kind of health issue with the church, I found the baseball diamond. Somebody sent me Rick Warren talking about the baseball diamond. This was way before, this is 1988, this was way before there was a purpose-driven church book. It may have already been created, but I didn't know it. I didn't know there was a Class 101, a Class 201, Class 301. So you can go back into our history at First Assembly on Little Rock, where I wrote classes for each of those. In 1995, and then Rod Lloyd, who's now the pastor there, was now on the team, and our team changed the 4 words that the baseball diamond revealed, which were membership was base 1, maturity was base 2, base 3 was ministry, and home plate was mission. If y'all remember those 4. It's all alliterated, as any good Baptist would do. It's not putting them down. I put in alliteration too. I got the word. It didn't matter if it was a biblical point or not. It had to alliterate. Come on, some of y'all get the same. So we changed those 4 words to connect, grow, serve, go. So that's how long I've been living with those words since 1995. All I was looking for, all I knew is that I needed a track to run on. That's all I knew. Because, and I've heard it said, and I don't know if this can be verified with empirical data, but about 2% of the population is what we would call creative. They're very creative. They can take stuff out of nothing and make it. About 13% are conceptual. So I think I fall into that category. I can take something, a concept, and so I took a concept and built my whole program on it, which I used to call a program, but I no longer call a program, because a program you can start and stop. And that's what happened with the baseball diamond. It seemed to be too linear, and people took it programmatically. That once we get around the bases, we're done. Then what do? So these words seem to be softer, more fluid, more mosaic, and so we use those. If you would go on our website, you found Connect, Grow, Serve, Go. I began to embed those in such a way that there were icons created for every one of those. And you came as a member of the team at First Assembly. You could not get into the bulletin or the budget if you couldn't assign an icon to your activity or your class or your lesson. So you had to determine where it fell. So what we're saying is, as we are building this and we're moving toward these values that we'll get into today, not only does this help show what you do, it really, and I think Ron hit that pretty good yesterday, tells you what you don't do. There's a lot of stuff out there that's really good that maybe some churches shouldn't be doing. But they'll get people from another church to come and say, you know, one of the most frightening things I've ever heard is several years ago, I even heard it taught. And I was trying to wrestle with it myself because intuitively I wasn't comfortable with it, but they would say it. You know, well, you got people in your church that have a lot of zeal, and they come and say, you know, Pastor, I'd like to start this ministry. I'll be doing, and the pastor would say, you go ahead, and basically silently, it's like Amelia, if it's of God, it'll succeed. If it's not, it'll die. Well, that's kind of a bad way to do business. Death is a terrible testimony.
That's right.
So that's why yesterday you heard Ron say, you could put two churches side by side and they're not competitors. I mean, you can't say these are our sinners. There's enough to go around. There's enough to go around. So this is how we came up when I got to the national office. I mean, I was a part of that system that we had. We took the Rick Warren baseball diamond and, as Assemblies of God, created a movement called We Build People. Anybody remember that? I was asked to write the book for Base 2, which I did. So I was very familiar with all of that. And so when I got to the office, I said to the people that had been involved in that, there was still some there, why did you stop it? It was helping people. And we had a variety of answers, and the answers were like, well, it was too complicated, it seemed too programmatic, and people got, you know, they had a lot of answers. And so this has developed, morphed, so to speak, metamorphosis. It's kind of morphed into what you're seeing. But this template, fellowship, you see, those are interchangeable words, we think. That's what we want them to be. And then we go through and we talk about vision. Again, we go through this material with that theme and we revisit vision. Why? Because vision leads. And we want to make sure that they stay on point. And we went through all of that yesterday. I actually said this yesterday. 3 reasons vision fails. Because it's not been communicated properly or often enough or with enough passion. Because yesterday we talked about the passion of the leaders, the ability of the people, and the needs of the community. Then we insert a lesson that helps people understand how to take people on a journey. Now, when I went to the church, I had been an evangelist for 18 years. I gave you some stories yesterday about my inexperience. But when I got there, my predecessor had been there 12 months. His predecessor had been there 36 months. And his predecessor had been there 60 months. So I don't know if that trend line bothers you or not. But 5 years, 3 years, 1 year, and me with no pastoral experience. So my predecessor, good man, good couple, they came from about 200 miles away. God had helped them take the church from about 90 to over 1,000. So all those people were like people that only knew one pastor, him. Came to a church that was old and historic, a good church with good people, but a 9-person board. That during those short tenures and long interims had decided if we're going to have this kind of irregularity and pastoral changes with violent DNA disruptions every time we bring a new pastor in, we're going to have to take control. So I said to Johanna, I don't know all I want to do, but I know I want to do one thing. The previous pastor kept saying, when I was over here, I could go back there, and we get our hair cut there, and we get our dentist there, and we go to our doctor there. Right. I said, we're going to not be there, we're going to be here. I moved into a church parsonage that I couldn't even unpack my furniture because it was so small. It had been used by the Royal Rangers before us. Now, to their credit, they had gone in and cleaned it up. The church had it and put new carpet in and some stuff, which I appreciated greatly. Well, I didn't care much about it, but Johanna had a 4-year-old daughter. And we first walked in, I think Johanna would tell you that Lizette couldn't touch anything. She thought it was interesting. I said, here's one thing we're going to do. We're going to be relational because we know we like people. That's just, we like people. Then we're going to look for non-controversial projects that are highly visible but not controversial. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew. So I like to raise money. So I raised money for a new van for the youth. I raised money for a new sound system. I already told you I bought a new piano. Just stuff began to happen. Johanna likes to clean stuff. So she had 2 retired guys named Amos and Sam, and they went through there like Sherman through Atlanta, and if it wasn't nailed down or something was historic about it, value, they threw it away or changed it, or it was an old building, they got it all spruced up. And then I just did what I did. So I had a church. Just like a while ago. They first, I don't know how long, Tommy, they had their worship service, and then when they got through, I had mine.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. That's right.
Services were a little longer, but so I didn't know what I was doing, but when I found what Ron's fixing to come and teach, I realized this is kind of what I've been doing. I just didn't know it had been codified. And so I want Ron to come and he'll teach this lesson. So we actually do this to the teams as well as to the leaders because we want people to know that what Ron said yesterday, we can't stay here. We gotta move. We gotta appreciate the new airport. We gotta understand.
Thank you, Alton, and that was a great therapy session for him to talk about the airport.
Yes, it was.
He's feeling better now. Your parsonage story reminded me of the guy from pastor from Ohio that took a church in Florida, and he got there and they didn't have the parsonage ready. It was supposed to remodel and fix up, so they left the furniture on the truck, and a week later they still hadn't got the parsonage ready. So the pastor's thinking, this is a sign of things to come here. So he called back to church in Ohio where he came from and said, is there any way to come back? And they said, sure, come on back home. So the next week they were back in Ohio and having Sunday lunch, and his 8-year-old son said, Dad, next time we go on vacation, can we leave the furniture at home? Growing up a preacher's kid always had great fun too. John Maxwell developed this levels of leadership back in one of the first 2 books John ever wrote, and probably the 2 best he ever wrote. But several years ago, his publisher realized that this chart had such value in it that they did a whole book on this chart. And we've used it to teach to our churches for a long time because it really brings into perspective what it takes to take the lid off of a church. And so many of you are familiar with it, but let me just walk you through it again. The lowest level of leadership is position leadership. You have the title, you have the position, that and $1.50 get you a cup of coffee at a gas station. Forget Starbucks. When I went to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, I was 31 years of age and made many mistakes in the first 6 to 8 weeks because I thought change was an event and discovered it must have been a process. The pastor there always cut the grass. So I'm the new pastor, and grass is growing up around the building, and I called one of the deacons. I said, somebody needs to get over here and cut the grass. He said, our former pastor always cut the grass. I said, I called him. You don't want to do it anymore. So I called a guy in the church on the phone. I said, would you be willing to come meet me at the church and help me cut the grass? He said, sure, Pastor, I'll help you. Next week, I called him back on the phone. I said, grass is growing again. He said, what time do you want to meet? And he and I cut the grass. The third week, I called him back on the phone, and he said, Pastor, you've got better things to do. I can take care of that grass.
Amen.
That was the beginning of Ron coming to understand what he needed to do. Never do ministry alone. Don't cut the grass alone. Let me give you to a degree. Don't do ministry by yourself. I had the title, I had the position, but Leonard and Henry were in charge. Leonard was vice chairman of the church board, and Henry was the treasurer, and Henry thought all the money belonged to him. And I learned right away that after moving the piano mistakenly, and they went ballistic on me. So Leonard liked to play golf, so Leonard and I started playing golf together. And we talked about the church. Henry liked to eat, so Henry and I started eating together. He believed Paul's book, admonition, you should buffet your body every day. And so Henry and I ate, talked about the church. We came to board meeting, and Leonard would say, you know, Pastor, I got an idea I'd like to share tonight. I said, go ahead, Leonard. Leonard shared his idea. Henry would second it. And I pastored that church for 2 years like that. I know where they got those ideas. But you see, if you don't have the influence, you have to start influencing the influencers. And many of our pastors in smaller churches do not understand that concept. Level 1 just gives you the right to lead. It doesn't make you the leader. It gives you the opportunity to lead, but doesn't make you the leader. Titles and positions do not make leaders. Leaders make positions. As a church moves forward, a pastor develops his ministry in church. It moves to the second level of permission level, which is about relationships. It's earning the right to lead others through relationship. Alvin Garrison is probably one of the most connected, relational kind of guys in the world, and he did that at North Little Rock in incredible ways. Level 2 is earning the right to lead. Then comes the moment when you have to make a decision. Are we going to improve anything in this church? Are we going to make things better at this church? Are we going to change anything in this church? Because to do that, I've got to go to level 3, which is the production level. At the production level, it's a place of making improvements. It's a place of saying we're going to improve the children's ministry. We're going to improve the youth ministry. We're going to improve the things we're doing here. And when that happens, somebody's going to get upset. Somebody's going to get mad. And that's why many pastors are afraid to go to level 3. But if you have the courage to go to level 3, then you begin to see things begin to grow at your church, begin to change in your church, which would take you then to level 4, which is the people development level. This level 4 is where you take the lid off the church. Because now we move from being doers of ministry to developers of people for ministry. This was the game changer for Ron. When I went back, I was working night and day, pastoring 200 people, and nothing changed. You know, when all else fails, read the Bible. And I went back and actually read Ephesians chapter 4. God has given to the church apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers for the equipping of God's people for works of service, so that the church can be built up, so that there will no longer be children tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine by the sly of men, and cunning craftiness whereby they lie in wait to deceive, but speaking the truth in love will grow up in him in all things, who is the head, even Christ, from whom the body is fit and joined together. I pastor a traditional Assembly of God church where they hire you to do the ministry. And they give permission on what to do and tell you what's wrong when you don't do it right. And I began to teach and preach Ephesians chapter 4. Because I was committed to the priesthood of believers. And I began to understand what my role really was. To move from a doer to a developer means you've got to change what gives you value. You've got to change what motivates you. You've got to change how you find fulfillment. Because if you're a doer, your fulfillment comes from people applauding you, people giving you the attaboys, people telling you how wonderful you are. As Alton described, the situation at the hospital. It's all about you, enough about me, what about me? And as long as you find joy from people needing you, you'll make sure they continue to need you. And this is where the curtain on life and ministry begins to come down. At some point, your joy has to come from seeing what God does through the people you trained, Amen. Not through you. After 18 years in Winston-Salem, on my final Sunday night, and I was leaving to go start ministry with John Maxwell. One of our teams had just come back from South America, and in the Sunday night service, they were ministering. And at the end of the service, I'm standing in the front row, I'm the lead pastor, and they're calling people forward, and they're praying over people, and they're ministering to people. And I'm standing on the front row, and I'm weeping uncontrollably. You know why? Because 18 years earlier, I'd have been saying, what are they doing praying for people? I'm the pastor of this church. But 18 years later, I'm watching the people I trained and developed being mightily used by God. And that's what's given me joy now. The way you find joy will determine whether you become a developer. If your joy comes and people tell you how wonderful you are, then you'll never be a developer. But if your joy comes from watching what God does through people that you trained, you developed, then you want to do more of that. And so we had to move that paradigm shift. How do we get not only the pastor, but the leaders of our church and our staff? Because if I hire a youth pastor who's a doer, they can pastor 50, 75 students. But if I hire a youth pastor who's a developer, they can pastor 1,000 students. Hello? And I had to begin to teach our church that it's not about Ron, it's about them. And I say to pastors that we work with, don't ever again get in your pulpit and say, we need people to help us around here. Don't ever get in your pulpit again and say, we need people, I need help in this church. I need workers to help me. I said, that's totally wrong. Those people don't exist to help you. Is the mic on? I said, those people don't exist to help you. You exist to help them. Because it's not about you, Pastor. It's about them. You have not succeeded unless your people have succeeded. And if we can get that understanding into the hearts and lives of pastors of smaller churches, it's the game changer. It was the game changer for Ron. When our church people got it, our church started growing 200 or 300 a year for the next 10 years. When we empowered people to fulfill their gifts and talents to glorify Jesus. You got to get to level 4 to take the lid off the church. And unfortunately, our colleges are still not teaching that effectively. Because I'm interviewing people that are college graduates right now who do not understand how to be developers. And so it's a constant challenge for us to get people to understand it. And as Alton said, you start telling stories about what God does through the people, not you. He stole my story yesterday, my hospital story. He stole my story. We hear each other so much, we just get our stories start blending with each other. I was in a restaurant one day with one of our leaders, and two ladies walked in the restaurant and sat at a table next to us. And I overheard one of the ladies say to her friend, "I figured out what's going on down at that First Assembly Church." Well, when I heard that, I'm all ears, because I'm the pastor. I'd like to know what's going on down there myself. And here's what she said to her friend. "I figured out what's going on down at that church. All those people think they're preachers."
Nope.
I want to get on top of the table and say, yes! She got it! Because everybody's been called to ministry.
Amen.
I told our church, there's not enough money in this town to buy me to be your minister. I'll be glad to be your pastor. But we've all been called to minister. The stats are telling us only 25% of our people are involved in ministry. And if we can get this and understand this, it will be the game changer. I always got up and went on top of others to make calls at hospitals. I just wanted to stay in touch. And I remember one day walking into a hospital room, one of the ladies in our church had surgery that morning, and of course our pastoral staff, our ministry team had already been there, ministered to their family, and had been there for the surgery and everything else. And I kind of walked in the door in the room. And the husband standing next to his wife at the bed. She had surgery that morning, and I walked in the room, and this guy says, "Pastor, what are you doing here?" I said, "I thought you was going to check on me." He said, "When you walked in the door, we thought the doctor had told us the truth." Well, what he was saying to me is, Pastor, we've been ministered to by our church today. We don't need you here. Now that may put some of you in depression. It gives me joy.
Amen. That's good.
It gives me joy. Because if we can help God's people finally fulfill their gifts and talents, training. One of the things we talk about in this journey is don't expect what you haven't taught. I was pastoring up in Philadelphia, and early on there, and I was preaching, and there was a mom with two small kids on the second row over here in the right section, and they got up and slipped out the side door right off by the platform area to go to the bathroom. And 10 minutes later, they're back. Walked right in that same side door. I'm thinking, where in the world security? They came back and sat down again. And it wasn't 5 minutes later, they're up again. And I'm preaching, and I'm starting to do a slow burn.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it dawned on me, the ushers have never been trained in this church. So why would I get upset with them? Don't expect what you haven't taught. I discovered that my church board, 3 out of the 7 were not tithing to our church. So I had a choice to make. Do I go to the next board meeting and blow the place up? Or do I make the assumption that nobody's taught them? I chose the latter. So I spent 2 months teaching on tithing to our church board. And then said to them, if you didn't understand this before we taught it today in the last 2 board meetings, you got 3 months to get this right. Because I want to have our records, our giving records, including mine, checked in 3 months to see if we were tithers. In 3 months, 2 guys started paying tithe and 1 resigned from the board. Hello? The development, the training process is critical and a great value. One of the things that's happened in many of our smaller churches is that we don't have expectations, and we don't teach and train and develop people And we use being small as our excuse. When I said to a pastor recently who has 120 people on Sunday, because anytime I hear them say, well, we're a small church, I correct them and say, no, there's no small churches here. There are growing churches here. Every church is a growing church. Because if you keep that small mentality in your head, it impacts how you behave. And I said to him, what's keeping you from having the best usher in New Jersey? It's not your size, it's your attitude. What's keeping you from having the best Sunday school teachers in New Jersey? It's not your size, it's your attitude about it. And it's coming to understand how we think about it is important, and what we do to develop and train people is the game changer. Is anybody getting this? This is the game changer for pastors in small churches. And this level of leadership is critical to help pastors understand that. So not only do we want the pastor to go up to level 4, but we want all the leadership of the church to go up that ladder with the pastor. Because we need deacons to be developers too. We need lay leaders to be developers too. I'm working with a church right now, and I said to the pastoral staff, I said, in 2020, everybody on this team and the key lay leaders on your team need to make a decision on who you're going to invest in your ministry. Who you're going to train, you're going to develop. You know, pastors say this to me all the time. Well, Ron, I don't have any trained leaders at my church. I have to do everything. I said, when do you think you're going to get some trained leaders? Now, the Baptist's going to train them and send them to you? You'll get some trained leaders when you stop running long enough to start training some leaders. Developing people. You can tell some of you just love this. Developing people. Moving from being doers to developers is the game changer. The highest level of leadership is personhood. It's where a pastor has made an investment over many, many years in a church and is viewed as someone who can be trusted completely. Attended a funeral for our friend Randy Valamont just a few weeks ago, and I can tell you in Griffin, Georgia, he's a level 5 leader. He's a level 5 leader. I worked with People's Church, Fresno, California, Jill Johnson, there 35 years. And he retired at age 80, and I became the pastor for 2 years as we transitioned that church to new leadership. Jill got cancer pretty quickly after he retired. And I was privileged to be a part of his funeral in Fresno, California. On the day of his funeral on a Sunday, Fresno, the 4th largest city in California, all 4 major networks in the San Fernando Valley, their lead story was the funeral of Giovanni Johnson. The Fresno Bee, million-plus circulation in that valley. The headline that Sunday morning was, our city's pastor has died. It's called level 5 leadership. If you witnessed a service in Griffin a few weeks ago, you'll know that that's exactly what that is, Jim. Level 5 leadership. Nobody questions level 5 leaders, because you've earned that right over such a long period of time. Our challenge for our pastors is getting them from 2 to 3. Because what happens for many pastors in small churches, they settle in, and it's just okay. My job is just to keep everybody happy, Ron. So they make sure they're having coffee with the right people, they make sure that they're doing all the right things, and trying to make everybody happy. And the reason some of those pastors are dealing with depression is because they're trying to be something they can't be, and that's making everybody happy.
Come on.
Can't be done. It's a setup for failure. And so what happens in Acts 2, we're trying to empower a pastor with his lay leaders to go from level 2 to say, we're willing to make the changes that we need to make to reach our community with the gospel of Jesus Christ. So we're through the Acts 2 journey, we're getting churches and pastors out of level 2 into level 3. And then take it to the next level, to level 4. And so many pastors are settling at level 2. We've got to empower them, we've got to equip them, and we've got to encourage them, as Alton said, to give them hope to go level 3 and then on to level 4. That becomes the catalyst to a whole new understanding about ministry and leadership. And so we help pastors walk through that journey and begin to unpack it. And we do it with their lay leadership as well, because the lay people need to understand that role. And so we really dig in on this issue of the church body is the church. You know, people come up to me and say, this church ought to be more friendly. I said, well, go ahead. This church ought to be doing more for missions. Well, go ahead. Go for it. I'm not the church. The building is not the church. The sum total of the folks that will be there Sunday morning is the church. And we say to the teams that are sitting at the table, you are the representation of your church. Here's the good news and bad news. The bad news is, it can't get worse than the people at the table. That's why great churches are made up of great people. People who've learned to let God develop them, grow them. And so we want to help churches move to the next level in their ministry and development. So, moving forward, Jonathan, if you come up here with me, you have the chart from Gary McIntosh there that talks about the different factors of churches at various sizes. And just grab a mic and interact on this, Jonathan, if you will, on Gary McIntosh's chart. Go ahead, Ted.
Well, thank you, Ron, for that teaching. As we're doing that teaching, we're actually talking about this journey, but a lot of times people have the wrong goal in mind. And because they don't understand the way church operates, it's more of a psyche than it is a science. I found this is not a new book, because I think he could revise it. I gave a copy of this book to every pastor in Arkansas. As I think I mentioned yesterday, 22% of the churches that are under my leadership as superintendent are in towns of less than 1,000. I can tell you that when you only tell people that their goal should be a big church numerically, you de-incentivize them. But you've also given them probably in your presentation something that won't work for them, and it may be toxic. So I took 50 pastors to Tommy Barnett's pastor school. I had Tommy in. He did a session. He says, and he said, you're a district that's brought more people to any one pastor school than anybody else. I didn't tell him everything. I said to the guys before we got there, I said, now, when you see the parade of ministries on Monday night, 150 ministries, you're going to get so moved, you're going to get so excited, you're going to get so challenged, you're going to want to go to that prayer mountain and never come down. You will be motivated, and you will want to do every one of those. Then the next day, you're going to go into breakout sessions, And you're going to hear instruction and wisdom and training tools. And some of them are going to be great. But some of them won't work in your context. And some of them will be toxic. When we got done and got back to Arkansas, then we met again. And I said, now let's go through and talk about those things that are going to be challenges if you try to implement those things that'll work. Why did I do that? Because of this. I'm not going to go through it totally, but you can see he's broken it down to small, medium, large. We have our own criteria, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, because Mike Claresall just showed up. But whether you take the numbers out or not, it doesn't matter. The structure he describes as a single cell, stretch cell, and it's in your book so if you can't see the screen, multiple cells. But what's important is the number is not important. The church where I became pastor averaged about 500 in Sunday school. Now, they were a Sunday school church. They didn't count morning worship. They counted Sunday school. I know, that's the 86. That's a different era. I had an adult Sunday school teacher that didn't hear me preach for the first 3 months. She had her church and I had mine. Mine was bigger, but hers existed. So our church might have had more people, but we were a single cell church because we operated with that kind of thing, Ron, where the power resided in key families, the leadership, and in a board. I told you yesterday about the staff member and how many people from his family were in key leadership positions. So we functioned as a single cell church. All of our decisions were driven by history. This is the way we've always done it. When you heard him make the statement about the pastor going to the hospitals, Brother Gocher, now they had short tenured ministers there for a while, but way back in their history that they remembered, the older ones, was a man that they revered. He was there 27 years. And they would tell stories of him going to the hospital and be so weak going up the stairs that he'd have to go up on his knees and have to stay on his knees because he couldn't stand up by himself until a nurse or a doctor or somebody came by and helped him get up. He was a lover. If they sneezed, he produced a Kleenex. It didn't matter. And that was their expectation of me. Now, I had pastoral care, but I still had to go. I preached, I can't tell you how many sermons, where I would take George Murray, the guy I talked about affectionately yesterday, and I would sit him in a chair, and I would preach on that priesthood of all believers deal I was telling you yesterday, and I would say, now, a visit from George, I didn't say it was a visit from me, but I would say a visit from George is a visit from this church. George loved ministry. Management and leadership, you could spend a long time talking about it. Managers deal with what is, leaders deal with what will be. I have no problem with managers. We need them. But George had that mentality. So his ministry was wrapped up in him doing the work. So if he went in and somebody needed to eat, he would fix the sandwich. I would send somebody with a sandwich. That's the difference. He would fix the flat tire, I would have somebody go fix the flat tire.
Or AAA.
So when we started talking about decisions, when you get to a large churches are led by vision. And hopefully when we get done, smaller churches will be led by vision as well.
Amen.
But that's the transition, and that's the tension that's always there. They're led by vision. They're led from the top down. Smaller churches are led from the bottom up. If you miss that cookie, you don't have to accept it long term, but you can miss it going in the door. And if you populate all of our conferences with pastors from larger churches, they're going to insinuate things that churches that are not as large are going to struggle with. And then they got to go, and guys, we got several district leaders here, network leaders, they got to go and deal with it. By the time they get there, it's so fractured that it's so difficult to put Humpty Dumpty back together.
That's right.
Am I right on that? It's just, I told one board, and I said, I want you to write your epitaph. They said, what do you mean? I said, write your epitaph. I'm coming back and I want you to have written an epitaph. They said, we don't understand. I said, this church is going to die, and you're going to want me to bury it, and I want you to tell me what you want me to say at its funeral. They said, well, we don't understand. I said, 7 senior pastors have either been voted out or forced to leave. I'm going to concede that a couple of them were knuckleheads, but not every one of them. So I think the problem wasn't them, it was you. You say you didn't? Yes. Yes, I did. I had a board member call me one time. I was going down for a meeting. It was so, when you walk into a church meeting on Thursday night and the house is packed, that's not a sign of revival. That board member called, he said, now, brother, you come down here, guy could get his car keyed or his tires flat. He said, are you threatening me? Well, he said, oh, I'd never threaten you. I'm just saying what could happen. I actually had that told me. I actually had a pastor stealing a church property when I went to my presbyter and another person. We got there. They locked us out of the church and called the cops on us. Barney Fife showed up.
That happened to Victor.
So
That happened to Victor and
embarrassing,
Ed. I'll tell you about that. Seneca.
Now these people, the reason church problems are so diabolic is both sides are praying.
Oh, that's right.
And both sides think that they're right. And both sides think God's on their side.
That's right.
So I take Johanna with me sometimes. I had some guys that went with me. There's one time I actually told them, back in and leave the car running. That's where the guys threatened to keep my car. I used to take her sometimes because they didn't know. I had 426 churches in Arkansas. And so there's people, that came to me, they didn't know what was going on. So I would drop her off at the front and I'd go around and come in the back. Why? I believe in this gift of discerning the spirits, but a spy sometimes works better. Sit among the sinners.
Is this being recorded?
See what they're saying. So we were at this one church that'll be nameless. Like Dr. Wood's dad pastored that church, and they tried to vote him out. I'm telling you, they had it in their system. Once they vote a pastor out once,
The blood in the water.
they can do. It gets in their blood.
Blood in the water. That's right.
They're like a shark. They see
Blood in the water.
They go after.
That's exactly right.
It packed that night. And I had a guy came down the aisle after me, and he was screaming. Screaming in my face. He said, Johanna told me later, she said, every time you'd start talking, these people around me would start holding hands and calling you the Antichrist.
Jesus.
I'm just saying. These are church people. She asked me that night, she said, when that guy's screaming at you, what were you thinking? I said, you don't want to know. I have a physiological fault. I can't stop it. I get in a meeting and I get a little bit perturbed or something. My top of my ears get red. I can't stop that. It just happens. It's a signal. She said, your ears weren't even red. You act like you weren't even reacting to the guy. And he was just screaming. What were you thinking? I said, I don't know. Finally, she coaxed me, and I said, well, what I was really thinking is I had a microphone, and I was thinking, the ball in that microphone is bigger than this one. I said, if I can get a big enough swing, catch him right between the eyes, I could drop him like a rock. In the name of Jesus. We left there, and she said, you need to take that Assembly of God sign off that church. They don't deserve a picture.
Come on.
I will tell you that was in the earlier part of my tenure. The more I poured into people like this, we had a monthly session. I gave the 8 things that pastors claimed they needed, and we did a lesson on those every month, and they were welcome to come. The more we did cohorts like what we're talking about, the less church mediations I had.
Wow.
And I don't know, I can't prove it. I'm just telling you. Most all the stories I have were in my earlier tenure. Because it changed. Let me see. So let's go to the next one. I want to show one more. Now watch this. Change occurs in a smaller church through the growth patterns occur. The obstacles occur. I let that become something I want everybody to understand. Because if you understand these obstacles and these growth strategies, then you can do what Ron was talking about. You can build training sessions, as I was talking yesterday about points of reference, before you have to deal with the issue. Because we have apostolic leaders today that are leading through vision with their leadership teams. But in smaller churches, so many times, that's foreign to them. And sometimes you can't blame the leaders. You can't blame those deacons or those board, because they've had to stay by. If it wouldn't have been for some of them, that church would not have existed. Because not all problems originate in the pew. There's sometimes you got pastors that just blew it. Wrong spirit, wrong attitude, wrong actions. I don't know. But it happens. Because we're all human. If you can get these things and they're even half true. I mean, like when you're talking about the obstacles in a smaller church versus the obstacles in a larger church. Look at that and see how much of it applies into your context. Not everything will apply in your context, but look at it. He's got another book on hope or something. He's got several good books. But my point is, understanding that lets you know how and why stuff is happening. So it may not always be your problem. It could be a situation that you didn't cause. Or it may be one that you did cause. But you can look at how it works. I told you yesterday, the number 2 predictor, according to our surveys, of church health and growth is the absence of conflict. The absence of conflict. So how do you get people that are good people. Good people. How do they get to the place? I was at a church meeting one night where the pastor's wife fainted, thinking the deacon was about to hit her. How do they get there? What a poor testimony in a town. We can't let that continue to happen. We just cannot let that happen if we can stop it. And maybe, our stories are our stories. You have your stories. All God's children's got stories. But my point is, this is closer to truth than you would ever want to believe. And I believe in prayer. But I also know that guy that locked me out of the church, several years later wrote me a letter of apology. His ministry suffered greatly because of his actions and the seeds he sowed. His life suffered greatly because of the seeds he sowed. And not all time, not every time will you get a letter of apology, but sometimes you will. So the reason we talk about the 5 levels is to help us get through these periods where we don't polarize the people so strongly that we can't come back from it. And that's why churches split and start. That's why we have the conflict that we have. Because we let it get too deep. We couldn't come back from it. This has to do again